cooperation and understanding. Unfortunately, the cameras are blocking us. If possible, perhaps we request that once you set your cameras, the Nigerian Women Trust Fund, Elect Her, TAF Africa, supported by the European Union under the Support to Democratic Governance project, jointly deployed 711 citizens observers across the 21 local governments of the state. Now, each of these organizations leads on a specific thematic pillar, and this includes election integrity, results verification, election security, disability inclusion, gender participation, peace building, misinformation tracking, and media safety. These are the thematic pillars that are covered by the 7 organizations involved in the election. In terms of the methodology, there's an assortment of methodology employed by the hub, and they're triangulated in nature. First, we're combining both systematic, statistical, and technology-driven to provide a comprehensive assessment of the elections around the thematic pillars that have been outlined. So over the course of this, electoral materials were deployed as scheduled in most polling units. Some logistical challenges, such as delays in the arrival of materials and election personnel, were recorded. This led to late commencement of polls in some polling units. Nevertheless, voters conducted themselves in a peaceful and orderly manner, reflecting a commendable level of political maturity and commitment to democratic principles. While it is too premature to provide exact turnout rates, our preliminary observation from the partners indicate low voter turnout across local government areas and several local government areas. And as noted in all the pre-election statements that each partner has issued, the apathy witnessed in the build-up to the election appears to have manifested in low turnout on election day. So to begin the thematic briefing, election officials had arrived at 7:30. This represents an improvement from the 28% recorded in 2017 and the 17% recorded in 2021. Because in 2021, by 7:30, only 17% of polling units had recorded early arrival of INEC officials. But in this election, in 49% of polling stations, INEC officials arrived at 7:30. On the deployment of election materials and personnel, we assess the deployment of election materials like BVAS, voter register, the voting cubicle, the indelible ink, and all the other materials. And we can say that all of these materials were found in 86% of the polling units. When you look at the issues relating to BVAS, we observed that in 5% of polling units, 2 BVAS machines were deployed across the polling units. However, in 3% of polling units, the BVAS accreditation count was not shown to voters to confirm that there was 0 accreditation before the start of accreditation. On accreditation and voting commenced in 85% of polling units by 9:30 a.m. If you look at the geographical distribution, It indicates that accreditation had commenced in 87% of polling units in Anambra Central, 82% in Anambra North, 84% in Anambra South Senatorial District. So by 9:30, 1 hour after the official commencement, in 85% of polling units, accreditation and voting had commenced. There are critical incidents that we have outlined. For instance, there are cases where there was no result sheets, like the Form EC8A. This was recorded in Amudimogo polling unit 1 in Amanu Ward in Ihala local government. We also observe incidents of vote buying, and this vote buying occurred in places like Orumba South, where we observed polling units, vote buying. One of the incidents we also recorded is this new sophisticated way of buying votes, where we had political mercenaries taking records of those who voted. In some places, they were also buying votes with POS machines. On the issue related to inconsistent application of election day procedure, we did observe some misapplication of the guidelines regarding what happens when BVAS malfunctions. In some cases, there was an instant case where the BVAS, even though the voter's name was on the voter's register, but the BVAS failed to accredit the voter was asked to step aside without taking his facial identification. So from a Yaga Africa standpoint, with respect to issues related to the process, these are our preliminary observations around the commencement, the availability of materials, as well as critical incidents. So to move to the next, perhaps thematic issue, permit me to invite TAF Africa that observed the accessibility regarding persons with disability to also share some of the preliminary findings in today's elections. Check.
Okay. Thank you, Samson. Good afternoon. NGs of the ad hoc staff and staff of INEC not knowing what to do when they're in the field. So you find a situation where so much has been done, so much has been said, but in practical terms, there are gaps. So the number of polling units that we went to, which is a heartwarming development that were guided by data. We know that in a particular polling unit 10 of one of the primary schools that we went to, there was a presence of persons with just one person, and we were happy that INEC deployed one magnifying glasses, which is a good thing. However, we still have a number of issues, and I'm not going to dwell on the problem as much as I will dwell on the solution, something that can be done even before the close of these. At TAF Africa, we're looking at 5 simple recommendations that INEC can implement before the close of poll. I think we're still having problems with the data validation. There's a need for INEC, if they can, through their data department, to begin to look at if there's some element, critical element of that we need to correct and re-strategize to ensure that we have accurate and verifiable data. The second is we notice that most ad hoc staff and staff of INEC, despite the investment in training, are still struggling to understand what to do in the field. So going forward, my colleagues has been in the field guiding some of them, directing some of them on what to do. We've also seen a situation where some of them have the inclusive electoral resources, magnifying glasses, Braille ballot guide, tucked in their Ghana Must Go. And those materials are not being used. The aspect is to enhance consistent deployment of this assistive material. There are places where data guides them to deploy that it wasn't deployed. So there's a need that there is compliance in terms of deployment. I want to also establish the fact that TAF Africa, with some of our colleagues, have been monitoring on the spot deployment, on the spot assessment of priority voting, and